Do you have an affiliate link to Ultra Botanica?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I want to do, where they fulfill it and you make a little commission.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your commission rate as a
We're
over life? Okay. How about we leave that one alone?
We'll talk about that later.
So now, welcome to our podcast today. It's Keith Bishop with PrevailOverCancer.com, and I'm Paul with Hyperbaric.plus. And we are back for our weekly podcast. And Keith sent me a note. What do we talk about? And I said, I can't believe how many people get into my chamber and they are a cancer. Some people like to call it a cancer thriver. Some people call it a cancer survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And then I question them, what are they doing to not have it return? And some of the answers I get are kind of mind-blowing. So it's really important that if you've ever been a cancer victim that you do something different,
Mm-hmm.
Just because you had a blip doesn't mean that everything goes back to where you were when you were 20 years old.
That's right.
Everything's changed, and we need to stay on course. And so with that, I'll let Keith give us our little disclaimer.
Yes, disclaimer.
So
yes.
go ahead and do
So,
that.
Yes. So this is an education program. We're going to be talking about cancer prevention, but we are not your medical doctor. We're not prescribing a treatment for you. This is education. Any information that you hear, you need to evaluate, consider, and share that with your integrative team, healthcare team. And then when we mention supplements, and we may today, we may mention a little bit, but not a whole lot. Mainly it's going to be food and lifestyle, very important type things. When I mention those things, actually it's supplements are not intended to treat or prevent or cure a disease, according to the federal government. And so always check with your healthcare provider before you make changes. And so, we had some interesting discussions today. People were sharing, several people with cancer concerns, and actually some observational type things. And we had a gentleman with a brain tumor, and the change in him, I guess he said had 3 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, so one last week and then one this week. So really, I just saw him last week and this week. Amazing change.
Mm-hmm.
And he's able to walk better, talk better, and he participated in conversation. Last week, his wife was trying to get him to clear his ears, and he couldn't follow directions. And it was amazing change.
Well, just getting in and out of the chamber, he can follow directions.
Exactly.
Because he's still a little bit cognitively in
challenge
deficit.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And just lifting the right leg was,
Right.
Difficult last week and this week. It's, hey, scoot up a little closer to the gym and lift your left leg. And,
Wow.
he's getting after it.
It was amazing. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. And so going back to the prevention type thing, so, what we have to do if we have a health concern, no matter what the health concern is, my specialty now is cancer, we have to make a change in the environment. So we definitely treatments, may help out. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that have, when I see them, now this is their 3rd different cancer, or it's come back. And so at least half of my clients are like a reoccurrence or stage 4, or like their 3rd cancer. I have several clients, they're on their 3rd different type of cancer.
Isn't a lot of that also the fact that, you get that cancer, you get over it, and you go back to compliance is the biggest thing. That we learned all
Right.
these things we need to do right. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people are doing the traditional medicine on their first go around, and when it returns, it blows their mind, and they're like, I already dealt with this. Why do I have it returning?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what can I do different? And that's where I see a lot of people come and do natural things
Right.
to change the lifestyle. And maybe they don't want to do what that traditional medicine was that they did last time.
Right.
And I'm going to try this, especially if they have time. There's a lot of slow growth cancers
Yes.
that you have time and you have markers, you have things that you can check on.
That's right.
And I know that's what you line them up, and you start watching these markers. And if we can move the needle Because we have time to move the needle, why don't we stay natural or maybe not traditional medicine and try to move the needle and pay attention to it? If we got those markers.
Exactly. And if at all possible, I mean, that's my preference, yes. And but in this prevention type mode, so if a person does have cancer, they've been treated, there's no evidence now, as well, one gentleman, another person with a brain tumor, he was talking about he had great results for 9 years because he was very strict on what he did. And then he
was clean and green.
he was great. And then he started getting back into the same eating and beverage pattern. Actually, it was I'll go ahead. So should I say the brand of that cookie? A big cookie and a sweet soda pop beverage every day and other things. He just kind of, within a year, he kind of got out of that, and cancer was back. And so now matter of fact, we even kind of tempted him a little bit today talking about some food things. But he said that there's no way he's going to eat that clean, baked item, breads or whatever that new place is close to where he lives. He's not going there. He's not tempted. He's not going to do it. So we have to change the internal environment inside our body to expect different results.
Well, for I think he said for 10 or 20 years, he stopped at On Q every morning as a contractor.
Right.
He stopped at On Q and got an energy drink and a Reese's, a large Reese's cup. And then at lunch, he went and got a Coke
and a grandma's cookie.
And that's what he did every day. And that was his diet every day. And
well, to the point, there's other physical things going on that kind of gave him an indicator, and that he was actually, before he was diagnosed with cancer, he had cavities. Every single time you go and see the dentist, a new cavity or two. And then once he was diagnosed with cancer and he quit eating those foods, no more cavities.
Isn't that crazy?
So those foods were actually acidic, and eating away. Well, especially the beverages, the soda pops and things like that were acidic, eating away at the enamel. And so we have to change our internal environment, and we have to assess and don't guess. We need to know what's going on inside our body and target things. So yes, there could be some supplements that we do need to take, to compensate for a problem, but we have to test to figure that out. And so, but today I want to share some information about prevention. And this is going to be for anybody that's watching, if you've had cancer or not. This is going to be for prevention in either state. And, if you have a family history of cancer, like I do and my wife does, we're really trying to do a lot more. We're on a prevention protocol. And so that's part of one of those flags.
You know what got me in the chamber just now that I didn't call attention to it, but we had 2 glioblastoma clients in there, and we had somebody that had their thyroid removed, and then we had one breast cancer in the back. And what really blew my mind is their doctors, their oncologists, are talking about repurposed drugs now. One of them even called back up after he chastised our client. He even called him back up and said, I think the conversation was, you stirred me a little bit, and I started looking into it. Man, there's all kinds of things going on with repurposed drugs. I apologize for what I said.
Right.
So, guys, we are driving some change. If we don't take this to our doctors and providers and question them about it, it's never going to change.
Right.
But all the people that I had in the chamber on this last session they've been down the cancer road, and they got off on the repurposed drugs and working with their doctors, and it's starting to change.
That's right. It is changing. And so we were talking about, many years ago, around 2005 or so, actually, I had a doctor call me the witch doctor because I asked this internist to do a vitamin D3 blood test on his patient to get it covered on insurance. Well, he called me a witch doctor because I was trying to do a vitamin D3 blood test. Well, 10 years later, he's actually doing a vitamin D3 blood test on every single one of his patients. And so he just didn't know.
Yep.
And so, and same thing with practitioners and everybody, if you're watching, this is a learning process, and we're always learning. There's a ton of research going on everything, whether it be repurpose or vitamins and minerals and foods and lifestyle. And I'm going to share some of that.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there's going to be some things on here that you're going to go, oh no, that's wrong. I'm not going to do that. But let me tell you, it makes a difference. Mm-hmm. And we need to be careful about certain things that are actually increasing the risk of like colorectal cancer in young people. And actually, there's some. I just had a young lady, with breast cancer yesterday, and I'm just almost speechless because I'm seeing young people with cancer that I've not seen before. It's always been more like in their 50s and 60s, and now we're seeing in their 30s. So, anyway, it's what we're doing that's allowing that to happen. The foods that we're eating, the lifestyle that we have in our environment is allowing these to happen. But so I'm going to try to focus on like the most important things that we can make simple changes on in our lifestyle and our foods, basically. So I'll get started with this. So, by the way, if you have questions, submit those to online on the channel that you're watching. Ryan's in the studio, taking notes and monitoring that. He's going to print those off for us toward the end of the hour in about 30 minutes. And so we can answer those and we'll get to them as best that we can. Also, the handouts are available at Hyperbaric.plus and at Prevail Over Cancer. At Prevail Over Cancer on the Learning Center. And you can download this handout that I'm going to be going off of, just kind of make sure I'm covering everything. So
ours is on resources. We got a resource page, and at the very top is all of our of our podcasts we've done. The handouts, all the podcasts are there, and our YouTube channel has all of the podcasts where you can go review them.
Good. And so, okay. So number one is we need to move our body. We need to be physically active. So it takes actually at least 150 minutes of exercise to reduce the risk of cancer. And matter of fact, it's actually very significant. There's I believe it was a breast cancer study, women that did 150 minutes of exercise had a 40% reduced risk of cancer reoccurrence. That's significant. Mm-hmm. There's not a drug that works that good. So that's how important this type of a thing is. So the goal is like at least 150 minutes or more. And resistance seems to work better. Walking is okay, but you have to walk fast enough and hard enough to where you get breathless or you're starting to sweat. Breathless meaning get to the point where it's hard to carry on a conversation. And then slow down a minute, kind of recover, and then start that faster walking. But also you don't have to go to the gym, although gym is a great place, and resistance, but you can use your body for resistance. You can do push-ups, you can do lunges, you can do leg lifts, squats, planks. I mean, there's all kinds of things. I have a HIIT, H-I-I-T handout on the Learning Center on my website that has some examples of some floor exercises that you can do and just using your own body. And I do that most days of the week. And then I have some dumbbells. I also do some other things too. And then even I posted a story, I ride horses. And we do some pretty extreme type things, and with those horses and equine, and and that can be exercise too. So it doesn't have to be in the gym, definitely. And so variety is important, on that. So exercise does bring blood glucose down. Cancer cells do like glucose. It brings insulin down. If the glucose isn't high, insulin doesn't have to be high. Insulin is a driver, it's a growth medium. It stimulates cancer cell growth. So if the sugar is high, insulin is going to go up. So now we got two things, easy fuel for the cancer cells, and then insulin is a growth factor. And so also, if we have appropriate amounts of body fat, we have less inflammation in our body. So there's many different benefits on that. But just start out. Matter of fact, one of my favorite things I'm recommending for my clients that can't move very much, and they're like maybe some of them are wheelchair bound or in bed, Tai Chi. Tai Chi activities. Actually, there's sitting Tai Chi, there's standing Tai Chi, there's walking Tai Chi. There's all different types, and you can modify that to your health challenge or your abilities. And so, but that's a great option. Matter of fact, I started integrating that now in the morning before I start my daily activities and before I start my sauna, heat sauna. I'm doing some Tai Chi just to kind of get the blood supply going and moving around, and I love it. And so, but physical activity is important before, or I mean, just regular exercise, but especially after you eat, to help bring your blood glucose down, to burn off some of those calories. And even simple things, and I'm not sure if this video is going to show it, but I'm just going to do heel raises. Just bring my heels up, and then I'll kind of rock it a little bit, bring the toes up, and then rock the foot forward and bring the heels up, and just very slow and intentional activity just like that after eating brings down your blood glucose tremendously. So if by chance you're spiking a little bit, which most people do, after eating, especially if there's any carbs, we can do these simple leg exercises. And matter of fact, you can do it at work. Nobody knows it. And so, and I actually, I in my office, I have a standing desk. Most of the time I'm standing. The only time I really sit is actually to do a video like this. Otherwise, my standing, one-on-one consultations are standing. And
Another thing people don't realize so when we're in the chamber, everybody's in Don't the
So-
deer like that?
Well, we don't have any deer where I live,
You don't?
actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So we do each have 5 to 6 acres in our area, but there's no deer coming through. Although, are we back live? Okay. So we do have a problem. I have an elevated garden beds, thinking that it'd keep the rabbits out. It won't.
No.
So I just had to run off a rabbit the other day, so eating some of my new plants. So, okay, so we're back live. So number 2. So number 1 is actually, movement, 150 minutes a week minimum, but, and it can be easy things, and just start that process. If you can't do 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, start with 5 minutes. Just do a little bit.
It's amazing how fast you'll ramp up.
And it's amazing because I do this too. I'm like a lot of other people. I sometimes, I'll allow excuses not to exercise. It's amazing how much you can lose too, and lose that ability and the stamina and such. So just start off and doing a little bit, and you can definitely do more and more. So even like riding horses, same thing, whether it be us or the animals that we're riding, we start off with small amounts and just keep increasing that, and then to the time where actually we can take an animal out, and both us and the animal can go 8 hours a day, and up to, we've gone up to 40 miles in a day on a horse in the mountains.
Wow.
But we don't do that all instantly. We're training ourselves and the animals.
Right.
And we've had other people that actually went with us, and we warned them, you need to, get your horse ready. And their horse, after one day, was down. I mean, could not, participate. Was sore, couldn't put the saddle on, and so that person they weren't able to go out on that. So it just takes practice. Okay, number 2, eat more like a Mediterranean diet. I have what's called Cancer Keto on my website. It's a free guide, and it's a version of Mediterranean, a little bit lower carbohydrate, trying to address the glucose sugar issue that cancer cells love that sugar. But there's many, many, many studies showing not just cancer, but for almost every health condition that we have, throughout the world, if we were to go into more of a Mediterranean type diet, we would see much better, benefits with that. So, but being careful about, the excess carbohydrates, and I'll say more like starches, sugars and starches. So starches, the most common things that we have here in the United States is going to be pasta, white potatoes, and rice and bread, and not counting sweets, but those type items we have to be very careful about. Those are the items that, set up the environment inside our body that helps cancer to form and helps it to be fed and to grow. So we have to be very careful about those. So the Cancer Keto is definitely a lower carb, but not no carb. And so it does allow certain foods like berries that are known to be anti-cancer to be included. So berries, and then we have to be a little bit more careful. Actually, like recently I posted, eating a couple of plums or prunes, can be definitely keto, because actually there's so much fiber and it's not a lot of carbohydrates. So in-season plums or dried, unsweetened prunes, are a great option, actually for bone health, but as a snack, and doesn't raise your blood glucose, but a lot of other anti-cancer benefits. And then the quantity. So even if you did a Mediterranean, diet, if you eat too much food, that's going to be a problem. And so I have what's called the palm rule. And so 3 palms of food is a meal. If you have more than 3 palms of food, now lettuce doesn't count. Lettuce and spinach, celery, parsley, doesn't count toward the palm rule. But almost everything else, tomatoes and okra and everything else would count toward that. But 3 palms of food for a meal. Typically, it's going to be, if it's animal protein, 1 palm of animal protein. If it's going to be beans or legumes, it's 2 palms of those legumes, and then, but still up to 3 palms of food at a meal. If you have more than 3 palms of food, except for lettuce and spinach and those green salads type items, you are eating too much food. And so, and people push back about the pasta and the potatoes and things like that. If you have more than 3 palms of food in a meal, you are getting too much food. no matter what it is. But those starches, are definitely a risk factor. So, and then let's see, total of 3 palms. Oh, and snacks. Basically, the snack rule is 1 palm of food. And so I typically will do intermittent fasting. So that's another prevention type tactic. I'll eat at lunch, and then I'll eat a nut seed protein bar. I bought some of those before. They were pretty good, weren't they? So,
Oh, yeah.
and so I'll have that for a snack. And actually, it's about the size of the palm of my hand. And then I'll have a big old handful of walnuts and pumpkin seeds and a Brazil nut combination. And I'll mix it up a little bit in that. And so I have that for another snack. And then I have dinner that night. So I'm eating, and I'm still getting my protein, but I'm just not as high of a protein, not as much animal protein. So I typically would do beans once a day, as a prevention. So when we look at, there's what's called blue zones. I wish I knew the name of the Dan, begin with the last name. I'm sorry, I'm not getting your name, Butner or something like that. He has a social media channel, and he's talking about blue zones, and he's gone around the world and evaluated what people do, that have a tendency to live to be 100. And it's actually eating beans frequently, not eating a whole lot of meat, and physical activity and social relationships, family and friends, and but walking everywhere and always being physically active. So it's not just cancer, but that is my specialty. Let's see. Okay, so back on the food thing about skip processed and burnt meat. And so processed meats include things that have nitrates added to them. So whether it be more like synthetic nitrates or even, they call it natural nitrates. Well, they take celery juice. So celery and a lot of plants, beets, have nitrates in them. And those nitrates actually can be good in our body. They really can. They help open up our blood vessels. Our body uses that to dilate and open up blood vessels, improve circulation. But when it's cooked, that becomes a problem, especially if it's burnt or high temperature. So the preserved meats have those nitrates, and those nitrates, when heated, turn into nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are nasty chemicals, and they will damage the DNA in our cells and flip a cell into a cancer-type state. So, I'm going for preservative-free meats, and one of my pet peeves, actually along this line is going to be pizza. And so pizza, we do, those of you that know me, friends that are following, yes, we do eat pizza. But, I've changed now, and I don't eat pepperoni, sausage, Canadian bacon, ham. I think those are the main ones, okay? Those have the preservatives in those, and they're cooked at, and I used to work at a pizza place. My first job was at a pizza place, and I know what temperature they cook those at, over 500 degrees. They're cooking them fast because they want to get it out to you fast because you want it fast, and or they're busy. At 500 degrees, that is creating nitrosamines. And so I no longer do the supreme combo, but I do a chicken pizza or a hamburger pizza, and then try to go thinner crust, or even better, a cauliflower crust, to reduce that. And then, the cheeses are okay if you have prostate cancer concerns or family history. I try to be careful. So actually, I allow myself to have cheese once a week, but that's it, because high or frequent use of dairy products increases the risk of prostate cancer. But those burnt meats are a major problem. But that also goes into the ultra processed foods. And so when you look at the ingredient list, on that label, if there are more than 5, say I prefer 3, but if there's maybe 5 different foods, but there's other ingredients that aren't foods that are added to that, that's a problem. And so a frozen pizza, I have yet, even the natural ones have a big list of ingredients. So,
crazy.
Yeah, so I don't go into that anymore. And so, but any foods, that have a lot of ingredients and you don't know what they are, that's a processed food. If it's in a package in a container, in a bag, we've got to be very careful about it. Now, bags can be okay. We have bags of nuts and seeds. So it's not always the container, but it's those lists of ingredients. My bag of all my nuts say pecans or walnuts. I mean, that's it. Nothing else. No seed oils. But the processed foods are probably the number one thing that's increasing the risk of colorectal cancer, and that's rectal cancer, colon cancer, colorectal cancer. Is being driven by that primarily. I believe is the number one thing. And so because people are eating those foods all the time. When I grew up, we didn't have processed foods. Everything was made at home. And I've mentioned before, we didn't have restaurants. We didn't even know what a restaurant was as a child. And so that's changed. Now it's a normal thing for a young person in the family with children to go to fast food, go to drive-thrus, and do those things. This is a different situation, and that's what's increasing the risk. So pre-prepared foods, even restaurants, I'm still going for simple type things. If I do go to a restaurant, I'm not going to be getting a hamburger. If it is a hamburger place, I'll eat the hamburger patty by itself. I'm not going for the bun. I'm not going for the French fries. Those are the bad things. I may put the hamburger even lettuce, make a salad out of it.
That's what I always do. And in fact, some of of course, now I've got to where I don't even
go to those
approve
restaurants.
of the meat.
So
there's as I'm learning
as you
about
learn,
that.
That's right. So we learn, we get more strict, right?
But there was a time when Burger King, I think, had a wrap, and they would take lettuce leaves and wrap that burger with all the condiments or tomatoes and onions and pickles would all be wrapped inside that, and then you would eat it like it was in a bun.
Right. Yeah.
And
well,
I've
done similar things when I'm traveling, and when there's not maybe choices, or I just don't want to take the time because I'm going a long distance with the horse trailer, and I want to stop, get fuel, get something to eat, get back on the road, and so, but I'll get a hamburger patty with lettuce and tomato and onions and all the fixings without the bread.
Or you can get a bag you can ask for it to be on a bed of lettuce.
Yes.
And they'll do that, and you just cut it up and eat it as a salad.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So
all you have to do is just change what we've been.
That's right.
You can do it if you think about it.
Exactly. So just be thinking, about that. So, for example, let's go into the meat thing a little bit more, and that's going to be about burnt meat. And so you've been introduced to some new meat sources, some more natural grass-fed beef, and how do they say the best way to cook the meat?
So medium, if you go past medium rare,
Right.
The farther you go past medium rare, the less omega-3s you're going to have. You're going to cook the omega-3s out.
Not only that, okay, but now you're charring the meat.
Right.
The more brown to blackened, the greater the concern.
So everybody that I talk to anymore, I share with them that, in fact, Lyndon and Tara, they use a sous vide to cook their meat because you can get it exactly at 100. I like mine at 134 degrees. And so whatever meat I'm cooking, and if I cook it in a sous vide, the meat all the way through is that same temperature. And then I take it out and I just throw it on a hot pan with some salt and pepper and butter. And I just, for about 60 seconds on each side, just to give it color.
Right.
Not to burn it, because I don't want to burn it, but it does give a golden brown finish to it. That's how I do it, and man, is it the way to eat meat.
Yeah. So medium rare steak is definitely that's what we do, and you have to admit my wife is actually rare. So she likes it better that way. And so, but we're blessed. We do have a source for beef, that is grass fed and hay, from the pasture, from the same pastures. And so that's what we do. So we have a pretty good source.
I need to put a link on this and talk about BF Farms. He's diving with me right now.
Okay.
And so we got to talk. So every time we're in the chamber, that's my office. We get in the chamber. We have great discussions, and he's teaching me a lot about how you raise grass-fed, more importantly, grass-finished. Anything, as long as there's a patch of grass inside a feedlot, that can be termed grass-fed beef.
Great.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So he said you can't believe what you see in the stores because as long as
Okay.
there's a patch of grass, it's grass-fed. Now, when it says grass-finished, it can have no grain.
Yes.
And,
Okay.
and hardly anybody does grass-finished because that's when they're putting the weight on.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it go from an omega-3 to an omega-6. When you
Yes.
feed it that grain for the last 90 days,
Right.
they're putting the weight on, but now they're changing over to an omega-6 is what that meat's turning into. So the grass-finished, and that's why it's so important not to cook everything out. You want to cook it as rare as you can, that's, you're comfortable with. His meat, when you look at his meat and you go to the store, you see the white marbling in it. Well, his meat is yellow.
The fats are more yellow.
Omega-3.
Right?
So the fat in that meat is yellow. I mean, it's yellow. It's not even a hint of white.
Okay.
It's yellow.
Yeah.
And that's what gives you all the omega-3s.
Yeah. So that's also the cooking temperature is important. So omega-3 fatty acids are actually very sensitive to heat, and they're easily damaged. So ocean fish, like ideally, I think of salmon and sardines are my preferences. You have omega-3s, and those you have to be very careful about overcooking them because you'll damage those good fats, and then omega-6s are a concern because omega-6s are precursors to inflammatory chemicals in the body and increased risk of not just pain and arthritis, but those inflammatory chemicals also stimulate cancer. So that's the difference. So wild game, they're eating the grass and nuts and seeds and everything else. They have more omega-3s in them. Than the grain fed. And matter of fact, those grains they have growth factors and all kinds of things in those. So, but don't burn the meat. And so the more dark that meat is, the greater the concern. Matter of fact, I actually bought a thermometer, handheld thermometer gun, so I can check my temperature on the meat. And even my coffee, and I already know this, but, actually, if you drink a beverage that is steaming hot, if it's over 145 degrees Fahrenheit, that increases your risk of esophageal cancer. And so, and I just actually used my gun the other day because I bought that gun recently. Yep, and so it wasn't steaming; it was 136 degrees. So, and the perfect temperature. I like that temperature. And so, steaming hot beverages can damage cells inside the body. Just burn the esophagus, be a concern. So, if you grill, marinate and use a marinade that has herbs, whatever, rosemary and thyme and oregano and garlic, and I mean, all these herbs have anti-cancer properties. They actually repair the meat so they're not damaged when you're cooking it. But cooking it above 350 degrees, I believe that's 177 centigrade or Celsius, is actually cancer causing. So cooking at a lower temperature for a longer period of time, like the sous vide you're talking about, which is actually more like boiling it, and boiling only goes up to 212 degrees. So we have to be very careful about that temperature. So I grill outside, but I use a gas grill, not charcoal, because wood and charcoal has a tendency to create more cancer-causing chemicals. Matter of fact, that charcoal is already blackened and burnt, and so it's more of a problem, than probably wood even. So
even smokers, you have a problem. I mean, that's the smoke. The carcinogen is the smoke that's giving it its flavor.
The flavor, right.
And that's not good.
So yes, I don't use my smoker anymore, except for I've converted it to dehydrating my vegetables and fruit. Yeah. So that's the purpose of it now, because so if you're in a situation and you have to preserve your meat by smoking, because that's the only way you can preserve your meat, okay, but I'd also be putting some antioxidant herbs and creating a rub on that too, for antioxidants. Okay, and then number 4, protect your sleep. It's 7 to 8 hours, 9 hours is required, and so I used to brag that I didn't have to sleep. I would work. I still work hard and long hours, but I would stay up late working on a project after my family would go to sleep, and that's wrong. And so that decreases our melatonin. Melatonin is a major anti-cancer type item. So are you missing a page or?
Nope,
or-
I'm good.
Okay. So sleep is extremely important. We need 7 to 9 hours. Set up a routine. Go to sleep at the same time. Wake up at the same time. Matter of fact, there's been a couple of nights this week. I'm working on a new project they have coming out. It's called the Prevail Protocol. Hint, hint. It's coming out. And so I allowed myself to stay up later. And then I set my alarm. Okay, well, I still need my 7 hours of sleep, so I'm going to set my alarm to, wake up later. That didn't work. I was still waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So even though I went to bed at midnight, so that didn't work. So, but our body does get used to a cycle. So we have to work on a regular basis. Be careful about phones and computers before bedtime. That decreases your melatonin production. It increases stress. Especially if we're doing social media type things. And I appreciate this channel sharing this information, but we have a tendency to be too connected to too many challenging things. We know too much about what's going on in the world. We're comparing ourselves to other people. It's just creating stress. And so we need to turn those things off and have a relationship with somebody, talk to somebody, and instead of doing things on the phone and not paying attention to other people. So let's see. Oh, stay connected. Okay. So loneliness, and that happens a lot. I have a new person yesterday, new client for me yesterday. She's a fairly recent widow, and I thought, okay, well, at least her job. I know she's working. And then I mentioned something about, because we're trying to come up with things for her to eat. And I said, so what do you do on your way, to work or home from work? She said, I work from home. Oh, okay. So what's your social connection? Well, I talk to people on the phone. Okay. And that's not a great situation. And so that once I learned that at the end of the appointment, so now I'm going to be actually like, okay, I need to help her to get, encourage her to get involved with some friends and church activities or something.
My veteran population, they come and they dive 40 times if they're part of our program. And I can't tell you how many veterans have told me that I didn't know how isolated I was until I started coming here and interacting with people, because a lot of them is during COVID.
Right.
I got a lot of history with veterans during COVID, and it was a game changer for them, for their sanity.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing how that connectivity is so important.
It is, yes. And so, my wife had surgery recently, and she's doing well, but she's been more isolated because she can't get out and she can't drive, and now she's just relying on me. Well, I work, and so I have clients all day long, and so she's mentally struggling a little bit more, and so I'm actually intentionally make a point. As a matter of fact, last night I said, okay, I'm taking you to choir tonight at church. And so, so I drove her, and actually I sat in choir, and that's the first time she's been able to go in a couple of months. And so, because she needs that connection with people, not counting worship and things like that. So, so stay connected, with people, not on your, you can talk to people on your phone, but the direct one-on-one, face-to-face is the way to go. And matter of fact, our best times, with our grandchildren when they were younger, and actually they had cell phones, and computers and games, and definitely they were playing. But we would actually, 1 week, in the summertime, we'd go camping, and we had this no technology rule. And the only thing we used was we would use technology to check the weather. And matter of fact, even at that, sometimes we just didn't know what was going on because we weren't using technology. And my mother would call us and tell us if a storm was coming. There's a storm coming, 90-mile-an-hour winds. So yeah, we had to take care of that. And yes, we did turn on the TV to get that radar, and so we'd know what was happening. But that special time in relationship with our grandkids was fantastic. And so we got to be careful about how much technology we're using. And then know your risk. And so assessing and finding out what's going on. So like, my wife and I have family history of cancer, both of us on immediate families members with cancer. So we're at a higher risk because of that. But we're not ignoring it. So we're actually trying to make changes, in everything we're talking about and supplements, but we're assessing those risks and making targeted changes. And for example, like the prostate cancer risk, I therefore eat, up to 6 eggs in a week because that is a risk factor for prostate cancer. I eat dairy, maybe cheese once a week because that is a risk factor for prostate cancer. And not all cancers are like that, but prostate cancer it is because of the growth factors and hormones that are in those. So I just don't do those anymore. I used to have chickens. I'd eat eggs every single day. I don't do that anymore. So I just changed a little bit on that. I may get chickens again, but I may have like a couple of chickens, so I won't be tempted to have, a dozen eggs every day, from those chickens. So anyway, there's also genetic testing that's available on my website, and I have one source. It's called MyRisk. I think it's .com, but I have it on my website, information about we can inherit genetic tendencies. It doesn't mean you're going to get the cancer, but if you have some of these genetic tendencies, you can actually target your food and your supplement and your lifestyle to help reduce that particular inherited risk. And then, and some of you have had genetic tests on your tumor cells, and that can also give you an idea about certain things that can feed those cancer cells. So we need to be careful about that. Stay up on screenings. The earlier you address a cancer concern, the easier it is. If you start having symptoms, colorectal symptoms of change in bowel movements or blood, if you don't address that early and wait years, you're going to have a greater problem. And so yes, and I'm definitely colonoscopies. There's DNA stool samples that you can send in to test for tumors with bowel movements. And there's all kinds of things that we can do for that. And so there's PSA tests for blood. None of these are perfect, but we have to assess that and weigh that information. Bonus protectors. Let's see. Small steps. I'll go through these. We have a couple more minutes, and by the way, submit your questions. So Ryan is going to be printing those off so we can talk about more prevention type strategies. But smoking. I didn't talk about smoking. We all know it's bad, but environmental smoke, environmental chemicals, can be a concern, not just for lung cancer, but for other cancers in the body. Limiting alcohol. Alcohol is a known risk factor, and actually, yes, some people can drink alcohol and they live to be 100 and no cancer, but then the next person, they're getting cancer when they're 36 years old from just having one drink a day, or breast cancer especially. And so actually alcohol actually does increase estrogen levels, and so it's a concern genetically for some people. So therefore, regular consumption of alcohol, even just one drink a day, can be a concern. Stay at a healthy weight. Excess body fat does make inflammation chemicals. Get your vitamin D3 level checked. We want optimal levels. You can take supplements. I prefer sunshine exposure whenever possible, if you can get that. And I'll change doses just based off of the time of the year, even as to how much I take. Cut out ultra-processed foods, packaged snacks, sugary drinks, fast food. They drive insulin and inflammation. Test your home for radon. And so actually in Oklahoma, we don't have much of a problem with radon. I did check my homes, and I have checked that, and almost no radon, coming up here. But there are certain regions that actually, it's a major risk factor for lung cancer. So, check your home for radon, and it's not like you have to do it all the time. Just do one test on that.
And water.
And water, could be in the water. That's correct.
A lot of people that have well water. I've had a friend build a very nice house, and it wasn't until they moved in that they tested their water, and the groundwater is contaminated big time. They never moved into that house.
Yeah. And, there can be more than there. For example, there is some arsenic issues in Oklahoma, as there are in many different areas of the world, and the amount of arsenic in our water is very, very small, but it's not zero. So, matter of fact, that brings up another item too. We're learning now that some foods have a tendency to have more lead, arsenic, cadmium in them, and it's not necessarily the manufacturing process. Here's some questions.
Thank you.
And so we got a few, it looks like. So, but anyway, we're learning, but the soil that our food grows in has these chemicals. Our body can handle certain amounts of these toxicities and metals, but daily on a regular basis is going to be a concern. So, and then, well, we're going to go into questions now. So I'm just going to mention one more thing. So I have a new Prevail protocol that I'm bringing out. And so the Prevail is an acronym, about pinpoint your biology, know your lab tests, root your nutrition, elevate your defenses, vitalize through movement, exercise, align your whole life, stress and relationships, integrate every system, put all this together, and then live with a purpose. So we have to, this one lady that I was talking to, she does work for an animal sanctuary. She's got a purpose. She loves her job. And that's very important. That's going to be a driving factor, a great factor for her on that. So I have more information and also about a kind of like a 1 week starter plan, things that you can do. But let's answer some questions. So we got about 5 minutes. So do I offer a certification for my coaching program? I'm sorry, I don't. And so I'm actually so busy with clients and actually bringing out a new program that I just don't have time to do that yet. So sorry. But I have a lot of information, free information, get on my website. Check out of all the cancer prevention strategies discussed today, which lifestyle change do you believe gives people the biggest impact for long-term health and why? I think that it's actually the processed food. And so going more for a Mediterranean diet, like real Mediterranean, cooked at home, or a restaurant that's doing the right kind of thing, that is number one, I believe. And then physical activity. And so actually that's part of the Mediterranean thing too, is that, they walk everywhere there. And so they don't have as many cars, and it's a better situation. So, but I think processed food is the number one driver of increased risk of cancer right now. So packaged foods, boxed foods, foods with more than 3 ingredients, that's a problem. So we need to cut back on that. Somebody mentioned it's glyphosate. So the glyphosate, which is an herbicide that kills weeds and is used to help dry some grains, is a definite risk factor for all kinds of health problems. It is part of the problem. That's also why I don't like packaged foods, because it's going to have that in there. As a matter of fact, we now have the technology, we can test that, we can see. But actually, there's a recent Roundup, it's called another item actually that is worse than glyphosate, and that is called picloram, Picloram. It actually is worse of a concern for colorectal cancer than glyphosate. And it's actually been used the same amount of time period, but it's actually used more than glyphosate. And now, so we're focusing on glyphosate. Let me tell you, that's not the problem. We need to be going with more organic type foods, and therefore that's where the grains come into a problem too. So it's not always just, excess carbohydrates from the grains. It's the ways that they're processed and the chemicals that they use, on that. So I live in the country. I know what they do out there. I know what they do to the grains and the feed that they give the dairy cows. Okay. Therefore, I'm not for that. How many chickens do you have? Actually, I don't have any currently. I used to have 6. And that means you get 5 to 6 eggs a day. And so they basically make 1 egg a day in the summertime. So although I probably will get a couple of chickens, and I'll put them into a tractor type situation that I can pull the cage around and move it around a little bit. And but currently I don't have any, and they have a tendency to eat any and everything, including your garden. So that's a little bit of a concern about that. One of my clients, I guess, I downloaded the HIT and received my new scale yesterday. Okay, good. So a HIT program, HIIT, exercise program, and then I have what's called a BIA sheet that actually tells you how to use the Fit Index scale to measure how much water, muscle, bone, and fat you've got, and so that to make sure that a person is getting the right nutrition program and activity.
$25 scale.
I know,
and you get all that
$25.
information on your phone every day.
Exactly, $25 scale, and so it's really neat. And you can get better ones, and my I have a new BIA guide that I've released. The one that's more like what Josh got, that was like $79, is a handheld one. Some of the nicer handheld ones, combination feet and hands, actually give you how much water's inside the cells, outside the cells, and phase angle, which I use to help guide people for weight management type issues. But it's really neat, on that. So you spoke about stress, sleep, nutrition, social connection, all affecting cancer risk. Why is it important to approach health as a whole instead of just focusing on just one area? Well, it's no matter what we do in our life, we have to have balance. And if we focus on one thing, we can definitely focus on one thing and make a change, yes. And I definitely do that. If you realize that you need to make a food change, or you need to add a supplement in, or you need to correct this relationship, or you need to start going to church, you need to start reading, you need to start doing meditation, you need to start doing breathing. But, it's a whole picture, because not one thing is going to keep you from getting cancer. It's a combination of everything. So I don't know if I'm answering that question right or not, but, on that. But they all are important. And so my mother, took care of my father with Alzheimer's at home. She refused to let him, be put him into a facility. And a couple of years later, she's diagnosed with brain cancer. It was a very stressful 8 years taking care of him, and so, and that increased her risk. Now, also using it wasn't a cell phone. This is before cell phones were that popular, but she was using a wireless phone, and that type of a antenna is probably what created the problem and stress, on that. So can a cancer patient eat salmon fish once a week or a month? And so I can't answer specifically and say that you should do that, but I do recommend eating salmon. I eat salmon probably once a week, on a regular basis, a wild caught, not farm raised. If it doesn't say wild caught, it's not going to be a better type salmon. And I try to eat sardines once a week also. And so I try to eat fish 2 to 3 times a week. And so, yes, so long as it's wild caught. Otherwise, they're feeding it that artificial feed, similar like what they feed cows. And fish that are eating that artificial feed in the farm-raised situation have, for some reason, elevated PCB chemicals. I don't know why that ends up in the feed. What are they doing to that? I just don't understand. So after 2 major surgeries, I couldn't drive, and even the weight of my phone was heavy. I started walking in the neighborhood and needed in-person connection. I made 25 flyers inviting strangers in my neighborhood over for a ladies' gathering. Wow, that's neat. I love that. Matter of fact, I know some senior citizen groups, actually housing and apartment complexes for senior citizens, and they get together and they play cards and dominoes every day. That's great. We have some friends that are in that situation. That's fantastic. 14 people showed up for that. That's really great. The next 12, but more wanted to come. They all need. That's right. If you ask, you'll find people. Everybody needs that connection. So important. So important. So, okay, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know I just kind of go off the conversations in the chamber, what's on people's minds, and you called me yesterday, so what do we talk about?
Right.
And I thought this is a great subject, and there's so much more out there. I'm going to be posting that one video that I watched today about those 6 foods.
Yes.
Because they give you that information where it makes sense.
Yes.
And how it cascades into each other. And I mean, they're simple foods. They're not expensive. They're just very quality of what we need to be eating.
Right. So that kind of goes back to this one question about, why so many different things, because actually when we do several things together, if we do one thing, I can push you with a finger and you go, Keith, quit. But if I do this, you're going to know it. Okay. And so if we can do more things together, we get synergistic effects. It amplifies it's more than multiplying the effect. So if we can do 5 separate things, it's a lot better than just one.
Yep. Well, Keith, as always, you're a wealth of information, and I appreciate you being here.
Sure.
Keith at PrevailOverCancer.com, and I'm Paul at Hyperbaric.plus, and we're at 122nd and May in Oklahoma City. Keith's out in Mustang, and so he drives about 45 minutes to get here every Thursday, and can't tell him how much I appreciate that.
Oh, it's great. I love
So we're going to be posting, Ryan's kind of jigging us a little bit about posting some things where you'll have access to some of the products we talked
yes,
about.
that's right.
So that's something we're going to be working on in the very near future. And we just hope you come back and watch us again next week.
Yes.
Keith,
Thank you.
got anything to fire it off?
No, that's it.
Hey, appreciate y'all. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that scale.
Yeah.
The scale would
Oh,
be,
yeah.
I mean,